first, we have BlinkLab Limited with the ticker code BB1. BlinkLab, a company founded by neuroscientists at Princeton University, over the past several years has fully developed a smartphone-based diagnostic platform for autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, and other neurodevelopmental conditions. I also actually sit on the board as a non-executive director for this company, so very proud to be a part of this one. To tell you more, I'm going to hand you over to our CEO and co-founder, Dr. Henk Jan Bully.
Yeah, so thank you, Jane. And basically with BlinkLab, we have developed what we call an AI-powered smartphone-based platform that is able to conduct neurological assessments in children. And we are using this platform for early detection of autism and ADHD. So when we talk about autism, the economic burden is enormous in the US. More than $700 billion was spent in 2024. And one of the reasons why the economic costs are so significant is because the prevalence of autism goes up. This is a global trend that is not restricted to the US. And in Australia, right now, the prevalence is the highest. To give you an idea, NDIS payments, 35% of all NDIS money is spent on autism, which means 8.4 billion in 2024. And this number goes up every year by more than 20%. And most of that money is spent on adults that live in what we call supervised independent living conditions. When we talk about autism, there is a consensus in the neuroscience autism community that early detection, early diagnosis and intervention programs will enhance quality of life later in life, and also independent living skills in people with autism. And that's why the American Academy for Pediatrics is recommending that each child is screened for autism at least twice during early development at the ages of 18 months and 24 months. And this is true for any medical condition, right? The earlier you detect, the better the clinical outcomes later in life. So when you talk about the potential product that could enable this screening, because right now this screening is not taking place, then you talk about a huge market size of millions of kids that are born in the US and Europe. The big challenge, however, in autism is that there is no medical test available for autism. Currently, there's no objective tool that can assist or aid clinicians in diagnosing autism. And that's why governments, but also healthcare providers, are on the lookout for disruptive technologies. To give you an idea, a parent that is concerned about the child's behavior currently go to a GP, but the GP is not diagnosing. Typically, the GP refers to another specialist, like an occupational therapist or a speech therapist, audiologist, you name it, but none of them is diagnosing autism. In the end, it is the neuropsychologist or the psychiatrist that diagnoses autism. The big problem is that there is a huge wait list for the psychologist because there's a shortage of these specialists. And that leads to late diagnosis and late intervention. So typically in Europe, the US, but also in Australia, families have to wait for years in order to get an autism diagnosis for their child. And we know that late diagnosis lead to late intervention, which lead to poor clinical outcomes in terms of intellectual development, speech development, language development, social developments, many domains. So the only way to improve this by having a tool available that is accessible early in the diagnostic workflow that can be used by primary care or GP. And that tool is highly sensitive and highly specific. And instead of going through the whole roller coaster of seeing all these specialists, you go straight to this neuropsychologist that uses basically the clinical judgment in combination with the objective tools that the screening tool is providing. And then you have a situation where you have early diagnosis and you have that huge window for early and personalized intervention. And we know that early intervention leads to very significant reduction in medical expenses. There's studies done in Canada showing that you can reduce these medical expenses by more than 50%. So, of course, the magic happens here in that BlinkLab digital biomarker assessment thingy. So I'm going to explain you how our technology works. So A child that is doing a BlinkLab test is watching a video on a smartphone. It can also be a tablet, and this can be done at home, but it can also be done in a pediatric office. There's no long questionnaires involved. There's no testing whatsoever. It's just watching a video for about 10 to 15 minutes. But what we do while the child is enjoying the video, every now and then we surprise the child with a stimulus that is kind of unexpected. So this can be an auditory stimulus, but can also be a visual stimulus or anything else. And we look at facial reflex responses. So as you can see here, what we do, what the smartphone is basically doing, it is capturing those facial landmarks. And based on these, it calculates, for instance, eyelid closure, but also mouth openings and emotional expressions. And when we train our machine learning algorithm, we can now predict with very high sensitivity and specificity whether the child has autism or no, or is neurotypical by analyzing these facial reflex responses. So of course, this video was kind of eye candy, but let me show you some real data. So this is a boy that is doing one of the BlinkLab assessment. It's called PPI. And what we do here while the boy is watching the video, every now and then we surprise him with a stimulus that is presented here in the blue line. And the stimulus is only 50 milliseconds. It's very short. And what you can see, I'm going to play the video one more time, is that the boy blinks. It's exactly the same as a knee tendon reflex. It's a blink reflex. You cannot fake it. You cannot hide it. And now what we do, instead of one stimulus, we present a stimulus pattern that looks like this. And here there's a soft sound just before the loud sound. And what you can see is that the boy is not blinking anymore. And this test is called pre-pulse inhibition, PPI. And basically what it tells me is that this boy's brain is filtering the environment. There's a phenomenon that's called sensory motor gating, which is intact in this boy. And that basically is a phenomenon that prevents the brain from overstimulation. And we know that this is can be severely impaired in autism. So that's why we have tested many kids with autism with the exact same test. And all this data is, by the way, collected while the boy is watching that video. And the video can be anything, can be Toy Story, can be whatever. This is data from an autistic boy doing the exact same test. We present the single sound, just a blink, and then you present the double. And this boy is still blinking. So this is just showing you that in this PPI test, which is only one of the tests that we're doing while the boy is watching that video, we are basically able to evoke facial reflex responses. We evoke them with the app, and we can use them as a digital biomarker for autism. I have to say two things here. So I cannot take any scientific credibility for this data. This data has been around in the neuroscience community for decades. We know this. The only thing that BlinkLab did is basically taking that existing neuroscientific, neurometric testing, and we made it available for a smartphone. The other thing I want to say about this is that we have built a whole patent portfolio around this system and methodology. So the testing itself, the PPI test, of course, cannot be patented, but the way that we conduct it can be. So it's all about neuroscience on the smartphone. I think that's the only thing I want you to remember for today. We're looking at those facial reflex responses. So there's no subjective questionnaires involved. It's all about reflexes. We use computer vision AI to analyze the facial landmarks, and we can use them as a biomarker. And basically what we do, we evaluate brain function. So we just completed, just a couple of months ago, we completed our large clinical trial showing that we can detect autism with a very high sensitivity of 91%, but also the specificity is very high, 85%. And especially the specificity is the most important. It basically, when I started BlinkLab and I was talking with people in the field, the biggest unmet medical need is a product that is very specific. There's many tools available, like questionnaires that are quite sensitive, but the specificity is often in the 30% range. So I'm really happy with the specificity. So I'm really pleased to announce that we started our FDA regulatory trial in the US, which will be a prospective multi-center trial, double-blinded, within subject comparison. And basically, this trial design is very simple. There's children that enroll in the study. They will undergo a clinical evaluation for BlinkLab. And on top of that, they will do a BlinkLab evaluation. And at the end, we compare the results. There's many steps that we have taken already, that we have completed, including our CRO, and we have started the data collection for the initial part of the study. What we have done, we have designed this trial in such a way that we can release the data from the first 100 participants in July of this year. And then we will have the final submission to the FDA at the end of this year, early next year. That's in a nutshell the BlinkLab product for autism. What is maybe even more exciting is that we are also now building our product for ADHD. We have already done a few clinical trials in the US and in Europe, and we will release these results very soon. And the data looks really good. And this is a second opportunity from an investment perspective that can be a huge catalyst for the share price, because we will have two separate studies with the FDA for two neurodevelopmental conditions. And also from a clinical perspective, it is extremely important to build a product that is not diagnosing simply autism or ADHD, but this can also basically distinguish between the two of them. And it all comes down to measuring that sensory sensitivity in people with autism and ADHD. There's a few other studies ongoing that have to do with adult testing. We just started studies here in the Netherlands in adults with autism. We also run a study in adults with ADHD. So there's a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline. I haven't even spoken about the CE, that means the European approval, and TGA approval that's also in the pipeline. And I also want to emphasize that our product right now is better than the FDA digital peers, Cognoa and Early Tech. We are outperforming both of them, but we don't have the FDA approval yet, and that's why we just started our study. That's in a nutshell BlinkLab. Happy to take any questions. Feel free to reach out to me or Brian, who is the chairman of the company. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. I'll get you to just stop sharing your screen there, and we'll jump into some questions. And again, webinar attendees, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So first up, when will the company pursue the enormous ADHD diagnostic opportunity?
That depends on the funding. So I have to say that we have enough money on the bank. We have enough cash to do the autism trial, but we don't have money for the ADHD trial. So once we have money on the bank for the ADHD trial, we will start our meetings with the FDA as soon as possible. So I'm thinking about, because starting up a trial takes a couple of, well, almost like half a year, even more. So we will have the meeting probably early summer and then start the trial end of the year. I really want to have these trials in parallel.
Wonderful. And look, I know you touched on this in the presentation, but what should shareholders be looking forward to from a news flow perspective in the coming 3 to 6 months?
Yep. So first of all, the FDA trial is a very exciting trial because we have designed it in such a way that there's multi-centers, many centers involved in the US. So right now we onboarded the first 2 clinical sites for the first part of the study. Just before this meeting, I had a meeting with another site in the US. There will be 8 more centers in the US announced in the coming weeks to months. So that's exciting. Of course, the data for the initial part of the study where we deblind ourselves will be released to the market. And this is probably the highest piece of confidence that I can give the market about the final outcomes of the study. Because there's no reason to think that the first 100 patients will do different from, first of all, what we've collected previously and also what we will collect in the past, in the future. There's this European approval, and there's always studies ongoing with all the universities that will be part of this, part of the news flow.
Wonderful. Sorry, there's just another one that's come through, and I think it's probably worth clarifying just about the 2 different conditions. So can you just clarify how the processes will differ or be the same between ADHD and autism?
So the BlinkLab testing will be almost identical. From a user perspective, it's the exact same experience. From a BlinkLab perspective, it's slightly different, but then we talk about millisecond precision of the stimulus delivery patterns that we present to the child. So it's basically the same product that can be used for both. So there's no new development. I think that's probably the reason why people are asking. There's no new development needed. And also we can probably work with the same centers in the US. We can work with the same team at the FDA. So there's a lot of stuff already kind of prepared and ready to go, but we have to activate it.
Wonderful. And sorry, I know we're running a little bit over time, but just a quick question here. We mentioned schizophrenia. So perhaps maybe just touching on whether or not that's going to be a similar sort of process.
Schizophrenia is slightly different. Also, I have to say, so we are doing a study on schizophrenia in Europe, actually. We haven't released the data to the market. So that is slightly different. And also there, it's one of the reasons why we're doing that study is also to basically look at the effects of intervention programs. So for instance, the use of antipsychotic medication like haloperidol or risperidone. So it's basically, it's also monitoring pharma intervention there, not only about diagnostics.
Wonderful. Well, Henk, that's all we've got time for today. I want to thank you for joining us. And a copy of today's recording will be available online in the coming days. But thanks again.
Thank you, Jane.